Hey folks, Mr. Justin here with Secret Weapon Miniatures. Today I'm going to bring you a look at the Instant Scenery Kit Wetlands, and we're going to use it to create two distinct styles on a pair of 40mm blasted wetlands bases. Alright, here is a quick look at what is included in the Wetlands Scenic Kit. I have some extra fine sand, some of the olive underbrush for creating bushes. This is the fine turf, which we will use to create moss, and then two colors of field grass, a bottle of PVA white glue, and of course a bottle of realistic water. Alright, before I do anything else, I'm going to create some clumps for my field grass. Obviously I'm going to need the field grass for that. A pair of scissors, some glue. I like using my Yoo-Hoo glue, of course. You can use cyanoacrylite or super glue if you don't have any tacky glue sitting around. I'm also going to need something to put the clumps on and a weight to put on top of them. In this case I'm just using one of my spare display bases and a jar of paint. You also want a bit of scratch paper, which I have here. I already have some field grass on it, so what I'm going to do is just take up a pinch of field grass, get a small clump of it, and cut it as flat as I can along the bottom. I have some of my Yoo-Hoo glue in a palette, so I'm just going to dip the end of this in there, dab off the excess. Set this aside. Take my base and weight. Set that down on top of it so that it'll dry. Just got the clump drying under here. So the glued end is here, sticking out so it'll dry. I'm going to do that a few more times. Create different size clumps, different lengths. Do this a few more times. So now I have a little collection here of field grass clumps. And that's it. I'm going to leave these to dry and do it a few more times on some others. Alright, I have my remaindered field grass here. Again, part of the reason I'm using the scratch paper, because now I can grab all that up, take my bag of green field grass, and just stuff it back in. A little bit of this stuff goes a long way, so do what you can to save it. You'll be using the same field grass for an awfully long time. Alright, I am back, and now I have my dried clumps of field grass. I have two of the 40mm blasted wetlands bases that I've painted up a bit. I have my undergrowth and some super glue. Before I get to the field grass, the first thing I'm going to do is figure out where I want some of the undergrowth to grow. I'm just going to look around real quick for a bit that I like. Something that's going to work, I think, right here. Yeah, it's going to be nice. So, put down a tiny dab of super glue. Press that into place. I'm going to get a couple other little clumps. for. Decide where I want this guy to go. I think I'll keep him at the end there, filling this log a bit. So you want to decide where your grasses, your foliage, where all of the foliage is going to be, so that it can complement each other, work together, create a good cohesive look on the base. So I like that. Put a piece over there. Alright, and now I'm going to start working with the field grass. I have a piece here. It comes to a point. I'm going to cut the end of that off just a bit. So figure out how far up the glue goes. You can see all of that is glue. So I'm going to cut a chunk of that off. This will give it a nice flat end again. You're going to have some loose pieces. It's alright. Just take the loose pieces off. Decide where you want it to go. In this case, I know I want a piece right in there. So I'm going to add some glue. Hold that in place for a few seconds. Now it's going to take a while to dry, of course. So it's good to work on this in small batches. Get another drop of glue in here. I find that doing the small clumps this way creates a more realistic look. I'll take a bit of the green, find the glue, so all that is glue. Get rid of the loose pieces. Add my glue. Green clump in there. So now we've got a nice mix of green and straw. I'll just finish that up. Alright, I am back with the field grass. Now that it's dried in place, I'm just going to take my scissors and come in from the top to cut down the length. Do this over a piece of paper so you can save those spare bits for later. So again, you can reuse this. It doesn't take much to manage. So get this down to the length you want. By coming in from the top, I'm creating different ends, so it'll be different lengths. You can see it'll be nice and rough. It's not going to be a uniform top finish. Pull that aside so I can save it. And again, here is our rough finished field grass with the clump foliage around it. Alright, for this piece I'm going to create a slightly different effect. What I'm looking for in this case is lots of foliage, lots of the underbrush, and some moss. So the first thing I'm going to do is, in this case, use my Yoo-Hoo glue instead of the cyanoacrylate, instead of the super glue. And decide I really want to just fill in this entire line. I want this to be really thick with clumped foliage. So I'm just going to take a random assortment of the stuff, press it in there, really get it into the glue. Tap off the excess. By pressing it down, it's going to pull the glue up into the material. Help the whole lot of it stick to the base. So now I've got that nice clump of green here on the side. Obviously you need to take some account if you're going to be putting a model on top of this of how much to use, but since I'm just using this for demonstration, I want to get a nice, good solid look in here. And I'm going to do the same thing again along that edge right there. It's coming out a little further over here than I want it to, so I'm just going to take my knife. It's got a finer point than my finger, gives me a little more control here, so I can pick out the bits I don't want. Press down again with the others. Pull that base out for a second. Add a bit more glue. Put that right back in place. I'm not worried about how thick the glue is, mostly because I'm going to come back in a bit and add the realistic water, so it's all going to get covered up. But it is important that it's glued in well, obviously, so that it stays. Alright, I'm going to let that dry and come back in a minute. Alright, for this next bit I have my palette, PVA, and the fine soil. We're going to use these to create some moss. I'm going to put a bit of white glue in my palette there. Open up my fine soil. Pour that on top. Use an old brush to create a paste. See right away you get a nice mossy effect out of this. I am just going to take some of this, load it up on the tip of my brush, come in on my tree stumps, put that in place. Nice clumps of moss in the trees down by where it joins up with the water. So there is my moss on the tree. Add some of that to my other base. Down in that crack where it meets the water. The old tree is. There I have another mossy tree. You let that dry and we'll come back again. Alright, now that everything's dry, it's time for the last step. I have my realistic water. You do not need to shake this, simply open it, hold it upside down, you'll see an air bubble here. Get that out of there. And I'm going to squeeze it to a depth of no more than 1/8 of an inch all over my base. Do this nice and slow. Deal with bubbles in a minute. take an old brush, pull those bubbles out to an edge. If you get some on the lip, not a problem, just wipe it off. Again, you don't want to do this too thick. You might have to do more than one application, so be prepared for that. It does want 24 hours to dry, and obviously if you're going to add a model, you want to pin it in place beforehand. I haven't added one here just because I don't want to run into problems with anybody's copyright. So here's my second base. Fill with the realistic water. Now, of course, I have to allow 24 hours for it to dry. We'll come back with the conclusion of the video as soon as that happens. And here's the finished underbrush version of the base. This one took 2 layers of realistic water to complete, as the first layer was partially absorbed by the underbrush material. The finished result, however, is a nice wet-looking clump of foliage and some old moss on the log. And here's a look again at the finished base I did that included the underbrush, field grass, and moss. This took 1 layer of realistic water to complete. And that's it. This is a look at the Wetland Scenic Kit and the Blasted Wetlands bases. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments or drop an email to Mr. Justin at secretweaponminiatures.com, and I'll see what I can do to help. Thanks again for watching.